All right, let's go ahead and get ready for our Q&A session. We're now at the start of project week 2. I posted a question thread this morning, so that should be in Slack if you guys want to scroll up and find that. I see a couple questions already, but feel free to ask more as we go along. So the first question that I got this morning, which was seconded and thirded by et cetera by a lot of people, was about setting up Postgres. So I want to start by saying I will start by addressing that question today, but I want to say a couple things about it before we get into it. The first is that you don't need to use Postgres for your project week. So if this is something you're interested in, then I hope what I can say here will help you get off the ground. If it's not something you want to deal with right now, no worries. But I think it's worth going over. On that note, the second thing I want to say about Postgres is that getting it set up is no simple thing. So we could actually spend an entire 2-hour lecture just talking about an intro to Postgres. It's a big topic. So I am trying to strike the middle here. I don't want to just say, too bad, it's complicated, figure it out. But I also don't want to spend too much time on it, because I think that if you are pursuing Postgres, one of the challenges might be to use the documentation and online resources to figure some of this out on your own. But I'll help you guys get started a little bit. So I'll run through how Postgres install and setup goes if all goes smoothly, but unfortunately, Postgres is a little notorious for not always going smoothly. So I think this will help a lot of you, but in some cases you might have to do some Googling, or if you're really stuck, just reach out to me directly with whatever you're experiencing. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and we will start talking about how to install and configure Postgres. Give me just 1 second. Okay. All right. Okay, so I have the Postgres website set up or pulled up here. As is often the case with the official documentation, it's a really good source of truth for basic stuff. But if things are going wrong, usually Stack Overflow and other articles are where you want to go. So let's start by talking about install. So we definitely need to install Postgres, and there are a few different ways to do this. You can actually fully download it from here. I've never installed it that way. The 2 ways that I have done it that I find to be both really effective are Homebrew and the Postgres Mac app. I'm not sure if there is a non-Mac version of this app, but so there's this Postgres app. It's really useful. As far as minimal complications, this might be the way to go if you have a Mac. Homebrew is good too, though. However, I do have to warn you, and I'll say this a couple times, do not do both. Maybe they've resolved this since, but I remember when I was first learning Postgres that I both tried to install the app and installed Homebrew, and they interfered with each other, and it created an absolute nightmare that I still can't believe I managed to get untangled. So pick one approach, but don't install the app and use Homebrew. Pick one or the other. So if you want to use Homebrew, if you don't have Homebrew installed, it's a great thing to have. I think you guys probably all do at this point, but you can look that up if you, for some reason, do not have Homebrew installed. But it should be as simple as just saying brew install. I believe that's, let me double check that that's what it's called in there. So Homebrew install Postgres. So I always want to make sure it's updated. Yep, that's the command. So brew install PostgreSQL. Not going to work for me because I already have it installed. But if you guys want to do this, feel free. It will take a second, but I'm just going to keep plodding on. So that would be the first command. And I can go ahead and even just, let me just, create a little set of instructions somewhere in here, and then I can post that when we're done. So the first thing would be that, let's go in here. I'll just kind of do a install Postgres step by step. So the first thing would be brew install. Oops, brew install. Okay, the next step is going to be to initialize the database. So we're already starting to get into some of the added complexities between MySQL and Postgres. There's a lot that's taken care of out of the gate for you in MySQL that really, in SQLite, that really isn't taken care of in Postgres. So you have to actually initialize a database. And there are different places you can initialize it. There are different options you can use. This is the one I'm going to recommend to you guys. And this is by no means the only way to do it or the definitive way to do it, but you would want to use this initdb command. And this is going to be essentially the location where I want to keep my database. So it's not like in SQLite where you actually have an individual file that lives in a repo. There's going to be somewhere in your computer where the database server lives. So anyways, so it's giving me an error and saying this exists, but it's not empty. That's because I already have a database server living in there. Hopefully that you will get, if you're starting from scratch, you will get something that says that it was created. So that would be the next command. That should automatically start your server. So we've just created a database server. Usually you just kind of keep it running, but if something stops it, you might have to manually start it. I know that's a big gotcha and something that really confused me the first time I saw it. There is a start server command that I don't know offhand, but if you just went ahead and Googled start server Postgres, I was looking at this earlier. Cool, so there you would want to make sure that this maps to whatever location your server was in, but just the Postgres command is going to start your server. So that's easy enough to remember. So we shouldn't have to do that. In fact, let's try to do that and we'll probably see another kind of, hey, what you doing? So I have mine in user local or Postgres. And what I see, I get this kind of postmaster.pid already exists. That's essentially its way of saying this server is already running. So you shouldn't have to do this. Just by initializing, you should not have to do the step. It's just something to keep in mind if you know your server's there, but you're ever having trouble connecting, it might be shut down. So so that's kind of an initial getting started. So on one hand, it's not that hard. Just a couple commands. On the other hand, conceptually, what we just did is really complex and would take a lot of time to really dig into. And in my experience and what I've seen other people experience with Postgres is that when things go wrong, when something gets out of whack with what's going on behind the scenes, it is not a straightforward thing to fix. So problems getting set up, I would start by just Googling, seeing what Stack Overflow or other resources you could find. If you tried this and it's really not working and you're stuck, please reach out to me and I can probably figure it out or help you figure it out, but try and Google first. All right, so that is just getting off the ground. So now we have to create a database. And I don't mean a table, I mean an actual database. So this is kind of like what we did, when we used, oh gosh, what's the name? I'm totally spacing on that app that we used with I'm just stumbling over myself tonight. I'm spacing on that name of the app that we were using to assist us with a SQLite, but we were going in there and using it to not connects, the actual app that we used to look inside of it and manually do what is it called? DB Browser, thank you guys. So yes, with DB Browser, we were able to go in and actually create new databases and all that. If you downloaded the Postgres app, you can do something similar there. But if you're just working on your own, you actually, now that you've installed Postgres, you have access to a bunch of command line tools. So you can do a bunch of stuff with your database just from the command line. And one of the most common commands you might use is create DB. So we're going to just create a DB called example. There it is. So we didn't get much feedback, but let's say that worked. So we created a DB called example. So how could we be sure that such a thing were created? Well, one of the best commands is the PSQL command, which actually allows us to go into our databases. So I'm going to say PSQL example, and now I'm in essentially a SQL REPL. So I can do raw SQL commands in here if I want. Really nice way to just kind of tinker around without having to mess with connects. A good reason to be familiar with raw SQL, even if you're using connects in your code base, is you'll save a ton of time when something goes wrong, just being able to jump in here and query your database directly. There are also other meta commands. One common one is this /DT. That is display tables. So right now there's nothing in here. We just created it. So it says did not find any relations. There are tons of these things. There are tons of command line tools that come along with it. So like create DB, there's a drop DB. There are a handful of these useful little commands we can run once we're inside a database. As far as which ones to use, you're just going to have to check the documentation on that. All right, so we have installed Postgres, and we cool little Postgres admin tool that was just posted by Stefan. Awesome. Let me just pull that up for anyone. Is that for Windows? Nice. So let me pull this up for everyone watching later. So this is a nice little tool you could use if you have Windows instead. Thank you. All right, so we have installed our database, or we have installed Postgres. We've made sure that we initialized our database. We've confirmed that it's running, and we have successfully created an empty database and gone inside of it. So I'm going to quit out real quick, just a /Q. And let's switch over to talking about how we would convert our code base to utilize this. So over here, I just have pulled up this testing for mini. Let me add this create DB. Create DB example, and then so there's a couple things. Here are the commands that I used. So let's talk about, actually, question for you guys. If we wanted to reconfig our connects to connect to this new database instead of our old one, where do you guys think would be the starting spot? So we now have Postgres ready to go, but where is our starting spot? Connects file. Probably wise. One thing we might want to do real quick is add, just do a yarn add connects PG. I think I already added this, so maybe not. Well, we can go in, so we want to yarn add Postgres, and this will make sure that connects and Postgres work together as expected. So this is just a, well, we already had, wait, what am I doing? Sorry. We already had connects, but we want to add Postgres. This will make sure that everything's working as expected. Do I have my, now I'm wondering if I even have my, let me just make sure everything's installed here. Okay, sweet. Haven't touched this code base for a couple weeks here. So I'll add this into the PG. So this PG library works with connects. All right, so now that we're in the connects file, we want to change a couple things. So I'm just going to mess with development. You guys, I think, can extrapolate how this would work in the other environments. So first of all, this client is going to change to PG. Second of all, we need to change our connection. We no longer want, so I'm not just changing the file name, because remember, we're not working with a file anymore. We're not working with a database file. We are working with a server. So we're actually, instead of saying what file to look at, we're trying to tell it what server to look at. And this is actually, this Postgres instance is actually a server that's been spun up on localhost. So what we can do is say Postgres localhost. So it doesn't really care about the port. I think the default port is 5432 for Postgres, but I have to double check that. So we can do Postgres localhost and then example, the name of our database. So that should work. Can we use SQLite 3 for dev and then use Postgres for deployment? Absolutely. So if it makes sense for you to just work with what you're familiar with in dev, stick to it. This is set up so that you can actually have different clients in different environments. So that's totally valid. Okay, let's make sure this works. So a great way to check if it works is let's run our migrations. So connects, and the default environment is going to be development here. So let's just do this. Cool. So far, so good. It says we ran 2 migrations. Let's go ahead and double check. So now we can go back, we can come full circle and go back to the command line here. And once again, jump on in to our example. And remember that command for display tables was /DT. And now we see that things have changed. We have, of course, the actual hobbits table, and then we have these Connects migration tables that are kind of these metadata tables that Connects uses to keep track of migrations. So there we have it. We have successfully converted over to Postgres. Do you guys have any questions on all of that before I move on to other topics? Also, I see someone has posted a cheat sheet. Let's see. Let's pull that up for you guys. Cool. Nice. So this is another useful little tool. All right, any questions about this Postgres business? And once again, if any of the setup process is something I know that's the worst feeling in the world where someone's like, just pop this command in the terminal and then you do it and what was supposed to just work gives you some awful error. So if you're having an issue like that, that's probably not something that would be useful to go over in this Q&A, but start by Googling, and then if you're totally stuck, you can reach out to me. Well, it doesn't look like anyone has questions on this. If anything crops up, you can go ahead and add it to the question thread. I see one other question currently posted, and that is, how do you properly work with asynchronous requests from component to component? That appears to be more of a front-end question. I am not 100% sure what you're asking there. And it's, once again, it does seem like more of a front-end question. So I want to clarify, if it is a front-end question, you guys should primarily be working on back-end code on this project, but I understand that working on back-end code ends up turning into working on front-end code. But yeah, if you could clarify that one at all for me, that would help me a little bit in addressing it. Let's see, we also have a question. Can you talk about the best way to debug a CORS issue? Once again, the question is a little vague. The approach to debugging can really depend on what the actual issue is. So if you could give me a little more information on what type of CORS issue you're having, that would help. What I would do first of all is, I'll just talk a little bit about what I would do, but I'm not going to be able to get far with how general that is. So the first thing I would do is I would make sure that it is a CORS issue. So this is one of the most challenging parts of debugging, is that there's this tendency to assume you know what's causing the bug, and sometimes it's completely different than what you think. So if you're not hitting your endpoint properly, there's a good chance that it's a CORS issue, but you'd want to confirm that. So, the first place I would start with any sort of not being able to hit an endpoint issue is making sure it's working in Postman, because Postman will generally work regardless of your CORS setting. The next thing I would do is, and let me actually just pull up the documentation for the CORS library. I don't know how great this documentation is, but we'll see. So, definitely the next thing I would do is just to pass in, when you pass in this CORS middleware, you can, sorry, scrolling around. Where's the basic setup stuff? So you can pass in the string with a star, and that says everything's allowed. So that's the simplest way to use CORS, is you just pass in a string with the asterisk in it, and everything should be allowed. So the next thing I would do is just set up CORS with that and see if you're accessing things correctly. If you pass in that, let me just show you what that looks like. So over here, and okay. So it looks like you're, once again, it looks like you're doing the core stuff the hard way. So what should work is, sorry, let me find my endpoints. Where are those? There we go. There's our server. So what should work is, of course, we have to add CORS. And up here we can say CORS equals require CORS. And then down here we could say server.use CORS and pass in this asterisk to say everything's allowed. So this would be the starting point. And without having to write any custom middleware and set any headers, because essentially what you're doing, I'll just, for anyone watching the video, let me copy this over. So by actually writing custom middleware, you're reinventing the wheel. You shouldn't have to write any sort of middleware like this, because this library will take care of that everything for you in a much more concise way, and it's time tested. So this will work, but it's not at all the best way. What you really want to do is start out with this. So this should give it all access pass. And if this isn't working, if requiring CORS and then passing it in with a star is not working, you might want to reach out to me directly, because something very strange is going on. However, where this might start to get a little more complex is if you want to actually configure CORS to do more specific things. If you want to whitelist certain certain methods from certain origins. This is just saying all access pass, which is a good starting point. But if one of your personal stretch goals is to learn more about CORS and say, hey, I want to make sure that my front end can access this, but this other guy's front end can't because they shouldn't be, then it starts to get more subtle. And I would really take a look at this documentation for how to do something more. It looks like you're just trying to do an all-encompassing CORS requirement. So if what I've just showed you isn't working, I'm not quite sure what is going on, and I would need more information. Okay, so back to this front-end question about asynchronous requests and components. Looks like Michael's kind of stepped in on that one and is talking about passing state to props. So that is, in short, that is the way to do it. I don't really have any front-end code on me that actually includes that. So it would take a lot of ramp-up time to get to the point where I could really talk about that. So I'm just going to trust that you two have that figured out and worked out. If this is something that keeps coming up or other people are interested in, I could always prep something for a minute and create a supplementary video. But I think I would waste a lot of time right now trying to address this question, since all my code bases on hand are primarily front end or non-asynchronous or back end or non-asynchronous front end. All right, so try back to the cores issue, try passing in that asterisk and see if that helps. All right, other questions? Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? All right, I guess that's it for the Q&A. I know that some of you guys already have reached out to me directly about questions with your projects. I'm a big believer that when you get stuck, 3 things should happen. The first thing should be that you Google. The second thing that you, the first thing you do is you Google. The second thing you do is you should start a dialogue in Slack with your fellow programmers and the PMs. And then the third thing you should do is reach out to me directly. The point being, feel free to reach out to me directly, but hopefully I'm not your first line of defense. I was not planning on doing another Q&A this week, but if you guys really want one on Wednesday, let me know and I could probably make that work. I see a little bit about a question about deployment to Heroku, and I'm assuming you mean with respect to databases. So in all honesty, I have not deployed to Heroku with a database in probably 3 years. So I would probably want to brush up on that. If that is, I'm going to throw a little poll into Slack. If that's something that a lot of you guys are interested in, I will go ahead and create a supplementary video for you on that one. So I will do that. And if you guys want it, I can create a supplementary video for you on that topic. But we're going to call it for tonight's Q&A. Like I said, if you guys would like to see another one of these on Wednesday, we can make it happen. And if you guys, I'll throw a poll up for that. So there'll be 2 polls in Slack for you guys. I'm also recording this right now, so that should be up on YouTube as well for you guys to view. All right. I hope you guys are enjoying your projects so far and have fun with them this week. I will see you guys around.